So a few words in framing this evening's discussion. Environmental Defense Fund, currently known as EDF, came out with a report a few years ago that focused on the need to reduce soot and particulate emissions from New York City buildings. They found a few thousand buildings out of New York City's many thousand, I believe it's around 800,000, were responsible for the vast bulk of soot emissions. To reduce it, they focused on number 6 and number 4 fuel oil. This led to New York City regulations, which we're going to talk about, which mandate the termination of number 6 fuel oil use, the dirtiest one, by 2015. Of the particular buildings that are affected, those buildings will have a number of different options to switch to number 4, number 2, natural gas, or a combination of other different fuels, including biodiesel. So what are the specific options that each of those buildings have will be a specific topic of this panel. However, the overall challenge that the city faces is much broader than the relatively narrow one of soot and nickel emissions from a few buildings. Because we're dealing with climate change and we need to roll back the current 393 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere down to 350 parts per million if we're to avoid triggering catastrophic climate change, we need to reduce our overall fossil fuel emissions by 50 to 90%. That's a tall order. It's a little bit further than simply cutting back on our use of diesel in New York City. We also have to deal with the fact that fossil fuels are limited. The supplies cannot be expanded indefinitely. And as a matter of fact, we need to acknowledge that we've already seen conventional crude oil production of the world probably peak in 2006, and that means that we're going to be looking at declining amounts of conventional crude, which is why we're drilling off the Gulf of Mexico in waters several miles under the surface of the ocean. What that means is we're going to be looking at shorter supplies of oil and probably higher prices and more interruptions in its supply. Natural gas, often touted as the viable, cleaner, burning, lower carbon fuel of the future, really not cracked up to be all it was sold to us as. There's, as we will hear no doubt tonight, a lot more carbon dioxide involved in the overall cycle of production of natural gas, a lot of emissions of methane, and of course lots of public health and environmental hazards. So what do? It's useful for us to look at the changes that are mandated for buildings that are burning number 6 and number 4 fuel oil to be prompt not only to comply with the New York City regulations, but as a way for us to look at how New York City is going to be heating its buildings and fueling its boilers far into the future. What are the combinations of alternative and renewable energy sources, conservation, and efficiency can not only replace number 6 buildings in the very near term, but also contribute to vastly reducing the amount of fossil fuels we're burning, period. And what is the next steps that are feasible for building owners and you in the audience here today? Here to answer that question is our panel. Our first speaker will be Dayron, did I pronounce that correctly, Duckworth. He has been with Tri-State Biodiesel since its inception in 2006. As head of the fuel sales division, over 1 million gallons of pure and blended low-emission biodiesel have entered the New York City energy stream in the last 2 years. Dayron is responsible for bringing biodiesel to the first public gas station in New York City and pioneering the B100 heating oil initiative as the best viable alternatives to natural gas while the city shifts to low-emission domestic fuel sources. Next on the panel is Ron Kamen, the chairman of Earthkind Solar Energy and the president of the New York Solar Energy Industries Association. Earthkind has developed successful solar projects for clients including multifamily buildings, hospitals, nursing homes, universities, and municipalities. Ron was also one of the leaders in the development of the New York Solar Thermal Roadmap, which aims to build 2,000 megawatts of solar thermal in New York State by 2020. So we'll start with a number of presentations, then we'll go to a number of questions, and then finally questions from you.